Hi there, Dave Levine here. Thanks for joining me for today's Sports Stories podcast. It's with great pleasure that I'm with you today, and I'm really excited. There's some really exciting times ahead with Sports Stories podcast, as we've got some great new content to bring to you and some other exciting news. The exciting news is that Ruby Lowsley-Williams and Lucas Brathwaite will be joining the Sports Stories team as marketing and podcast team members, which is really exciting, and they'll be bringing you some fantastic insights into various topical and really important themes around sport, with a program called the SS15s, which will be short stories of about 15 minutes long, which will really get to the point, really uncover some real great detail and have some fantastic guests on there. With regards to today's podcast, though, it's going to be a podcast with a bit of a twist. The special guest on the program today will be me. I'll be delving into my sports story and life story a little bit with the very good help of Mr. Ian Braid from Docia Sport. Ian has kindly offered to interview me today. He's been a previous guest on the Sports Stories podcast and has also heard from many people about, when is it Dave's turn to share his story? Let me understand his journey. Why has he come to doing sports stories? What's his been involvement in sport and how has it impacted on his life? So it is with great pleasure that I've shared my story with you today. I really hope that you will enjoy it, but more importantly, we'll get some benefit and some insights into how my story might be able to really help you. So without further ado, let's crack on with the show, and please stay till the end, as I'll be passing on some further information about what's coming down the line with the Sports Stories podcast. So grab your cup of tea, sit back, enjoy, take some notes, and I hope you get a load out of today's episode. Well, Mr. Ian Braid, welcome back onto the Sports Stories podcast. It's fabulous to have you with me here today. I'm a little bit excited and a little bit nervous because I think we're going to do something with a bit of a twist here today. And Ian, I'm really pleased to have you with me because so many people over the last sort of 18 months or so have said to me, Dave, what about your sports story? What's your background? What's happened in your little world? You've done this conversation for so long now. Is it not time to sort of turn the tables, as it were? So Ian, I'm delighted that you have come along and asked me to do this today, and I'm going to turn the sort of tables around and be in your able hands of sharing my sports story with you. And please feel free to delve in, ask, and I'll give you the very best of me if I can.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here and to be not sat in the hot seat, but me serving with new balls and seeing what you knock back across the net. People have demanded this, you know what I mean? We need to know what this bloke Dave Levine's all about. So I am a nosy old so-and-so, as you know. So it's my privilege to be here, and hopefully we ask the right questions. I know it'll be interesting. And without much further ado, perhaps we should crack on.
Indeed.
So, Ian Braid serving with new balls. Love all. Dave, where did it all begin and how long ago?
Well, it began a long time ago, about 50 years ago.
Surely not.
Yeah, about 50 years ago, and I was born in South Africa and lived there till I was about 7 or 8. And my kind of sports stories, as it were, started right back then. I was born into a kind of a white middle-class family in the middle of the apartheid regime in South Africa. We had a lovely house, great weather, and we were privileged, or not privileged, depends how you view it, to have a tennis court and a swimming pool in our back garden, as most white middle-class people did. And I guess that was my introduction to being outside, playing sports, and just becoming active as a young person, right the way through to the age of 7, where we left and moved to England.
So, are you an only child? Are there other Levines or baby Levines around?
There are other Levines. There are an older brother, and then I've got 2 older sisters. So I am the baby of the family, the youngest one. And so they're all older than me, 4, 6, and 8 years older than me. So I am the youngest coming through. And they've all been involved in sport and had an influence on me, I guess, in many ways, because I've followed in their paths.
And do you have any memories of what it was like as a white middle-class family living in an apartheid regime? Explain that to me. How did that feel? Look.
Yeah, it's. I do have some memories. those are the formative years of my life, that can't not have been quite impactful and influential on me and who I am. Bearing in mind I was only 7 when we left there, I can't remember it in great detail, but we lived in a house, we had a gardener, we had a maid, we had kind of what termed servants, but we had a real different relationship with them in that early stages. They were very much part of our family, as opposed to they're just working for us. We looked after them really well, and actually got to know their families. And when we left the country, we left things for them, albeit there was lots of problems around doing that because they were then privileged to have things which they were deemed not to be allowed to have. It was quite an interesting time, I guess, in just learning and being brought up in that environment. There was a huge amount of segregation still. I went to a little nursery. My brothers and sisters who were older than me, as I said, went to a sort of a high school there, and it was largely white high school. So it was quite a kind of a divided place, and I guess I was exposed to that at a very early stage. And my parents worked and stuff, but I also got used to living with a maid and somebody who kind of looked after me a little bit. They lived in the house with us, kind of stuff, or in a small outbuilding. But it was a fabulous upbringing, actually. And I guess I smile because to this day, a lot of that experience I know does influence and impact on some of my thinking today.
Right. Well, maybe prove the test of time over the next next hour or so. But there must have been a tipping point or something for your parents when they, said this is not a place to bring up 3 young children. What was that, and what was it like leaving what in many ways sounded like an idyllic 7-year-old's childhood?
Well, I guess it's always easy looking back in hindsight, as what it was like. The tipping point was for our family that my brother would have had to, through conscription, go into the army, and he was at the age of where you had to automatically go into the army, and that was something that our family weren't kind of interested in, and we didn't want for him, and that was the tipping point. So my father's actually born in South Africa. My mother was born in the north of England, in Halifax, and they met in Leeds and then went back over there. So my brother is actually born in England, and then me and my 2 sisters were born in South Africa. So we had connections and ties to the north of England. At the age of 7 or so, I hadn't been to school yet, because in South Africa you go to school when you are about sort of 7 or 8, and in England you go to school when you're sort of 3, 4. So we came to England as a family, leaving behind sort of a big house, an outdoor environment. I never used to wear shoes much because I was always really physically active and outside, playing, swimming, playing sports, doing all sorts. And we came to England at that stage to a really small house where there were 6 of us in it. We had to rent it. We had no money. We had no nothing. So it was quite a traumatic experience looking back on it. But at the time, I probably didn't realize that. But, I was a happy young lad with, everything that there was to have. And coming to a different country with a different kind of culture and environment was quite a big upheaval. And I had to go to school and make friends and start my life again, really, in England at that age.
So you're 7. If you'd stayed, you'd be starting school. You come to England, and 7-year-olds are, as you say, probably 3, 4 years maybe in the mix. What was what? I mean, you'd look physically bigger than that must have been, when you're 7-year-old and not looking to stand out. South African accent, I suspect.
A tinge of a South African accent. I'm born at the back end of the year, in school years. I'm an August birthday, so I was still younger in my year, but still, nevertheless, I came to school here. I think I was a 7, 8-year-old, and they put me in a nursery school. We went into a small village where we could afford to rent a house. Went to a small village school, and I was put with the 3 or 4-year-olds because at that age, actually, I couldn't read. My parents didn't know that I could read. In fact, they only recognised that I could read when I was at the age of 9. When we went back to South Africa, and I read on a beach that we were on the coast, and it said that on the beach that there was no this was a beach for white people only, and that was the first time that my parents knew that I could read. And I was about 9, and my mother actually taught me to count, doing maths and stuff. She taught me to play bridge, and in the card game of bridge you have to count to 13. So that's her way of teaching me how to count as I grew through. And so it was quite a traumatic time coming here. Small village school, didn't fit. And I often tell this story because it really again resonates with who I am. But I went to the small village school. I couldn't read, as I mentioned. We used to have spelling tests back in the day where you've got your 10 spellings, and I used to learn 5 of them, and I used to get 5 right and I got 5 wrong, because it was quite a traumatic experience learning just 5 of them because I couldn't read very well. And the school penalised me. They didn't allow me to go swimming because I didn't get all 10 of them right. And that was I got punished for getting 5 right, which was an amazing achievement, but I got 5 wrong. And I had to get left behind and not go swimming because I didn't get them all done. So
I mean, that's more than, well, I mean, I listen to you speak and it sounds cruel. And I guess, if you're a man that's spent your first 7, 8 years doing loads of sport, to then have the penalty of, because if they'd allowed you to go swimming, you would probably have won the school gala or something, wouldn't you? But
well, I wouldn't. My parents always used to say, Dave, you spend more time under the water than on top of it swimming through it, you see. So it was a playful activity. I'm not a great swimmer. I don't really enjoy it, but it was just such fun, and a release for me. And I think that experience, the school, without wanting to be critical, it was a small village school, and I don't think they knew what to do with me, really. Not very big numbers in the school, and they just, lots of mixed classes and so on. But I guess looking back on it, I learned a lot about what it was like to be brought up and live through and experience those early stages of learning in that kind of environment.
Years ago, there probably wasn't the phrase outlier, but that, and you didn't know you were one, but you rocked up and delivered it, didn't you?
And my parents, actually, at that stage, again, probably they didn't really know what to do with me, and they spent a lot of time at kind of educational psychologists and looking for support, working with the school to try and work out how to kind of get me going and engage me and help me learn and develop. They were exploring a lot at that stage, as well as to how to best do with me. Because my brothers and sisters were ahead of me in some ways, and the educational system was, in some ways, they were far more advanced than the English system when they came over, but in other ways they were behind. So there was lots of sort of negotiating with the school system and education system for them as well when we came to England.
Right. Were you bullied?
Was I bullied? I wasn't. I don't recall being bullied at primary school. I was probably more bullied at secondary school. And bully's a strong word. I think I was probably a little bit, but I learned a lot of good strategies how to manage myself through that. When I got to secondary school, jumping on a little, I was in the lower sets, as it were. I was still sort of catching up. I got in with a lot of the rougher parts of the school, but joking aside, sport was the vehicle that really helped me, because I was good at sport, and it was the way I got to connect and meet and show my value and worth with people at secondary school. And I think that's how I found my credibility. I played football a year up, I was credible. I was the in crowd because I could play sport.
Right. It sort of resonates with me, and not that this is about me, but there's a man who was had to have written dispensation to wear long trousers because I was tall and gangly. Went to a grammar school in a working class fishing port and sang in a church choir. I didn't set myself up very well to, but sport was the saviour. I learned how to run fast. That was my, fear or flight. I ran. So we'll come to the sport bit, because that gets us interesting. But you take or leave education. Was it, in retrospect, a good time? Going through secondary school as well.
Education was an important time, I guess. Yeah, I realised that I needed to engage in it. I've got brothers and sisters that were all doing all right. You know, I guess you follow on their coattails a little bit. It was interesting. We came to a town, and we were a sporty family. My brother was good at sport. He played football, cricket and rugby, but he was predominantly a footballer and a cricketer. That was his kind of flavours from over to the UK. My sisters played tennis really well and netball and swam really well. So we were quite sort of welcomed into the sporting system, but we went to one school and were told at the one school that, you know, we asked about, well, for my brother actually, asked whether he played football or rugby, and he said he was a footballer. Where he was told that he played with the wrong shaped ball because the school at that stage didn't play football. You know, so we actually went to probably the biggest school in the area, but they went to the biggest school, which was the high school in the area, but it was enormous. But again, I followed in their coattails, really. They did quite well and found a way through it. And I think what I began to realize is education was all right, but it needed to be on my terms. And that's what my parents learned, is that, Dave, you'll do all right if you play to what you enjoy, what you've chosen and what you're good at. And what they'll ended up letting me do is kind of follow that track. I've got a philosophy, and I know some people will smile at this, but I guess at that stage I learned to find out what good enough was at school, because I needed to make sure that I passed, and success was passing things. Success became that I didn't have to do things again, rather than being really high.
Maybe the trigger point for that was learning 5 words by rote for spelling tests, and so it's, you know, there's a little bit there. And I know it, you know, we're back in the day here, aren't we? But
yeah.
the education system was used to dealing with its students as commodities and couldn't adapt to.
But I think, Ian, that's what I really learned, or my parents really did, because I did the first year of A levels back in the day, and what I ended up doing is, after the first year, realised they weren't for me, and I bombed out. I left and I went and did a vocational qualification in and around sport, because that's what interested me. That's what I was good at. That's what floated my boat. And actually, that's where I put the energy, because I chose to do that, and I had some buy into it.
Okay, so let's have we'll come to the vocational bit in a minute. But you're in your teens, your sporting credentials will be coming to the fore. You've talked a bit about football. Tell us about your football. Did you have trials with Manchester United, or you know, some I don't know, Skipton Athletic, or in West Yorkshire? And what other sports were there?
Sport became an avenue for me to kind of just express myself and connect and enjoy. My kind of went through school, and I played football through school quite often, kind of a year up, a little bit at times. Got to know a lot of people. Where I went with it, I ended up playing county football and county cricket. Went for trials at that sort of age, but I think I was about 17 when I was playing for the area of football and at cricket. And I went for the next level trials, and I got in my own way. I turned up at the trials, and I think this is sort of smarts from a bit of the past, really. I went to the trials and I turned up there, and it appeared that everybody had been chosen already, because I turned up there and everybody had the right blazers on, or the jackets, and everybody knew everybody else, and that just didn't sit very comfortably with me, going to the trials of that sort, because it didn't feel like you were being judged on your ability, but more about who you were. My dad wasn't big in the football or cricket world, and I actually chose not to go any further with it, because it didn't feel right.
Sometimes, you know, and smarts and hindsight and retrospect and all of that, but sport sometimes creates so many perceived barriers to entry, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, it really. My son did a triathlon. He did the Blenheim Triathlon of the week. Mrs. Braid attended, as did Ella, his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And there was a woman official who was doing the bike out, bike in, you know, in the transition area.
Yeah.
absolutely barking at everybody. Do this, do that, do the other, stand up when I told you. And somebody said to her, can you give me a bit of a break here? This is my first triathlon. And anyway, this woman got dobbed in by Mrs. Braden and Harry's girlfriend. But again, would that guy ever do triathlon? I don't know. We could do another pod on barriers to entry in sport. Right?
And we will.
But I mean, the listeners need to know: were you in a Yorkshire football sort of a way? Were you Billy Bremner, or were you Alan Clark, or what position were you? And same for were you a boycott or an Arnie Sidebottom?
No. What was I? I'm a good, solid defender. I started my footballing career back in goal because I think that's a really great place, and you always need to take your turn. No one wanted to play in goal with
safe pair of hands.
Safe pair of hands. And then I came out. I'm not a skillful, creative kind of person. I'm good, solid, safe pair of hands. But I think I can turn a switch on a football field, and I can become really competitive. And I've learned a lot about myself in terms of the competition side of things. I really like to win, but I'm a really great loser as well. In terms of if I've managed to play to my best, then I'm happy with my own performance. So in playing football to this day.
Whoa. Now here's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Your education, I know what I need to do to get by.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a win or lose, our Billy's got 8 GCSEs, how many's your Dave got? All of that nonsense.
Yeah.
And now on a sporting pitch, then seriously ahead of your time. As long as I've been as good as I can be, it doesn't matter whether Skipton Athletic won 2-0 or we lost 2-1. Because you're at peace with your own performance. I think. What age were you when you come to that? I haven't done that yet.
It's always been something with me. I never keep the score playing football. I never used to know what the score was.
Is there such a thing as a friendly in your life?
It's a good question. Is there a friendly? I think there is. But I played football just the other week, actually, having not played for about 7 years, and I still was competitive. But I wanted to give my best, but I knew where the line was as such. So do you know what? And I know we're jumping around here a little bit. One of the sports which I came to further on in my career, in my life, when I got to back into school and into university, was skiing, and I really loved it because it was about competition against yourself. I never did it competitively, but it was something I could try and just improve who I was and how I did it. And it felt. I just love that opportunity, really. So I take that into my football and into cricket and whatever, is just try and get better at what you do. And if I've come off there having done my best and given it my all, then I was happy with that.
So Dave Bites Your Legs Levine, we've got that, right? The Masters footballer, obviously, just as stated. And I won't ask you the result because it doesn't matter, because you were pleased with your performance. And what were you in cricketing terms? Were you, as I say, were you boycott or Arnie Sidebottom?
Well, I was probably either, because I was a wicket keeper.
A Bairstow then?
A Bairstow maybe. But I was a wicket keeper probably because I would have got bored not being involved. And I think that's what brought me to cricket. I could bat a bit and I could bowl a bit, but my cricketing career came to a halt when I was paired at a trial with another young lad who was also a wicketkeeper, but his dad was the coach of the team, and he got in and I didn't. And I was probably better, if similar. Better than
all right. That's the other podcast, right? And we are going to jump now. But your this philosophy that you developed about being happy with your performance, irrespective of the broader result.
Yeah.
Have you passed that on to your kids? You see that in them?
passed on or passing it on, maybe. I think it's something that comes over time. I have conversations with my son, who's my middle son. He's more into his football now. He's 16, 17, and he's at that age of working out what winning really means and competition, and being able to bring his best and his aggression in a kind of a purposeful way to what he does. But I also, I guess this comes into the work I do to this day, and around actually, is it process driven or is it outcome driven? And I think it's something about actually really wanting to go in there and do your best and being comfortable with that, working out what that is. So I'm in the process of hopefully bringing that through in them a little.
Good, because they will be the richer for it.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd had that conversation with you when I was a kid. that would have saved me a lot of angst when I was playing rugby, etc. So I mean, we're talking about your philosophy there. And looking back and things. If I was to ask you about Dave Levine, would you draw a coat of arms that reflected your values, and you had 4 quadrants in which to put the most important values? Because I think that I am a personal believer that that moral compass really drives who you are as well. What would you say your key values are?
I work with this a lot, actually, and I think about it a lot. And one of the things that does come back to me a lot is around fairness. And I can see why that's come through in all of my kind of upbringing in life. Fairness is something that's important to me. Part of my moral compass, though, is also around his words to do with authenticity and bringing the very both best, but also the very genuine whoever you are to the party. And I think that's important. I like to try and work with people and be with people, around people who can just be themselves and don't feel like they need to be somebody other than that. And another thing, I guess, which is kind of ironic, really, but it's this thing around hard work. Because in the early days, I guess I don't know whether it was labelled as hard work, me coming through my career and education, when I'm saying, I found out or worked out what was enough. But actually, I used to have to work really hard to get what enough was.
I was going to say that it isn't necessarily hard work. It's work is hard.
Yeah.
That's how that's how it was for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not your fault. Nobody's casting it.
Yeah.
So go on. Anyway, so just give us so fairness I've got, authenticity I've got.
Yeah.
Hard work I've got.
Hard work. I guess that's what I look for in both myself and others, and I think that's the other thing which is important to me is congruence, actually. And what I mean by that, and I use that a lot. Sometimes I don't use that particular word. I've worked with people that are going, well, what does that really mean? But for me, it's kind of nearly practicing what you preach, and I do that in myself. That's important to me. Is to, what I say is what I do, and I look for that in others.
Right. Brilliant. What I do like about this is I'm making you think.
Yeah.
Which is I don't know. It's a privilege, Dave.
Yeah.
A genuine privilege. So you got through education. You gave it 1 year of A levels. Enough already. I'm done here. Drop the mic out. So and you said just a couple of minutes ago about you doing a vocational course. I'm guessing that was sports related, was it?
Yeah. So I went and went to the local college, which was not what's done in our family, I guess. And I did a vocational BTEC qualification, which back in the days was the vocational kind of approach in sport, leisure and tourism. It's the kind of the course that I did. What I had my aspirations on, I guess, was to do things that I enjoyed and progress in that way. And I managed to move forward. I went to the university off the back of doing a vocational qualification, which again was not really heard of back in those days. You had to come through a much more traditional route. But I got a distinction in the vocational qualification, which opened the door up to doing a sports studies degree.
What was your parents' perspective on this. You know, where you're the youngest, has every other Levine gone to university, and you've gone, I'm taking a left turn here rather than the right? Or were they supportive? Were they? Did you feel supportive?
I felt very supported. You know, I'm the youngest of four. You might argue in some families that, you know, the parents make the mistakes on the older ones as they're coming through, and then they forget about the last one. That might be one way of looking at it. But what my parents learned from going from those educational psychologists back in the day, and right from the sort of day dot of my educational experiences, that they needed to get out of my way. And actually, by getting out of my way and letting me do what I kind of signed up to and chose, then I'm likely to do what's right or do what's best. So they got out of my way, and they said, well, you choose where you want to go, what you want to do. And I did, and I put my mind to it, and I was successful at it.
I'm minded of the phrase that there's a role of parents is to give your children roots and then give them wings so that they can fly. And it sounds like Mr. and Mrs. Levine, whether they set out to do that, but they made a pretty good job of that.
Well, I think like most families, the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs along the way, and to this day, my mother still works. She's a therapist counselor, so she works in that kind of field of supporting people through the highs and lows of their careers, through their marriages and their relationships and all sorts of things, and has done that for a very long time. And my father's had his own business, but also has worked in the field of charities, working with people with learning disabilities and in a lot of the sort of community settings. So, it makes me smile looking at parents, given that I'm a parent myself now, and talk and think about it a lot in terms of, where is the book and doing a good job, and what is a good job. But I think what they managed to do for me is manage to find a way that worked, and didn't probably treat me the same as my brother, or they learned from my brothers and sisters. But I did feel that they just allowed me to fill the space that I needed to fill, which was probably quite scary for me, but also empowering looking back now, because I was in charge of it.
And you knew they were there. There was always a touchstone, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Makes me smile. I think about my two kids, Harry and Jess, and we'll use a sporting analogy, right? And an animal one, right? Harry was very much a dog, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this stick. Go and try that. Right, I've got that stick. I'm done. What else can I do? Well, here's another stick. Go and try that. Right, I'm back again. And that was his attitude to sport. And Jess, who has she doesn't thank me for having my build of being, she's a beautiful girl, beautiful woman, tall and willowy, but long legs, so on and so forth. Her attitude to swimming, right, was more feline, right? So she learned how to swim because it's a life skill. You get that. Right, Dad, I know I can swim. You know I can swim. So why do I need to do any more swimming? And we had to deal with them as individuals, because it was, you're a member of the Braid family. Sport is compulsory, right? We're just got to work out what the sport is.
Yeah.
But we had to do it in a different way, and it with each of them. And no, I'm really impressed too. Was one of your parents more of an influence than the other, and in what way would that be?
I think in a sporting context, they were both kind of there in terms of a support. Neither of them have played to a really high level. I think the sport was in the family, in a sense of my grandparents and uncles were into rugby and cricket and those sort of sports. I didn't ever know them, or never knew. I knew my uncle a little, but not a great deal. So I don't know much about their background and their stories, and they've not had a great influence. But there's something in the genes there. But I think, again, coming from where we came from, where kind of sport was a prerequisite or a way of life, kind of set us up on our. My parents played tennis, and it was kind of recreational stuff, really, more than anything. An integral part of the family, and we connected into those worlds enough. But just through school, never at a very high level. Members of tennis clubs, and did bits of swimming and but nothing more than that really. But my mother's probably had a greater influence looking at me. I'm more similar to her in the way that I turn up in the world and the way I think and the way I do what I do, because of the kind of the work that she does and how I now do the work that I do.
Yeah, but interesting that both are involved in helping people and have been, and that's what you're good at as well.
Well,
so anyway,
let me jump in there, Ian, because I think you either do what your parents do or you do the very opposite. That's kind of, and I know it's not simplistic as that, but my brother's a professor in social psychology, and my two sisters are occupational therapists and work in mental health. So, you know, the whole family are related to people development and supporting of psychology of individuals in many ways.
Right. The fact that my father was a travel agent and my mother was a receptionist in a doctor's surgery probably undermines your argument a little bit. But anyway, never mind.
Well, I think you do the same or you do the opposite. I don't know.
Well, no, I don't know. That's another podcast. So you did your BTEC. That would have been local. Where was the university?
The university was Newcastle, so I went to Northumbria, which was back in the day. There were universities, and they changed from polytechnics, I think. But the idea is, and what was fantastic for me, is actually to come off a vocational qualification and get into a course. There weren't that many sports degrees out there at that particular time, but that was one of the best, or it was a renowned university. It had a really good, sort of credibility. So I was really pleased to get onto a really good course, it was called sports studies. So it had a kind of a science background to it, as well as the leadership and the management and the coaching kind of flavor to it. So it's still quite generic, which really suited me.
And were you continuing to play sport, and were you also volunteering in any way, maybe at that time?
Yeah, so it came at an interesting time, really, because I think that's, for me, the start of your more formalized career. I guess you've got to start thinking about, directions. What do you do? Where do you go? So I was picking up bits of work, I did a lot of football coaching to kind of earn money. Worked in sort of youth services and earned bits of money. So working with people in education and youth was something that I was earning bits of money at. I carried on into university, though, in the same kind of vein of just wanting to explore, play sport. And, the course exposed me, I guess, to a number of different avenues, because you do your kind of coaching qualifications alongside the degree. So I did coaching qualifications in squash and basketball and football and rugby and others, at a basic level. So I got a real broad exposure. But again, what I found, both through the course, but actually the avenue to connect with people and meet people, was to join clubs. And so I played for the university in football. Never had aspirations to really drive to the first team, but I wanted to play because I wanted to connect with people and I wanted to really enjoy what I do. And the competition wasn't the be all and end all. It was the actual enough competition, but also the environment and the context was really something at that stage. Okay,
so let's assume that you came out with first class honours, and modesty will prevent you from telling me that's right or wrong. And interesting that you clearly had this philosophy of do what you're good at and enjoy, that you were talking about earlier. You were doing well because there's quite focused, and it's all following down the same sort of tram tracks. So what when you left uni, what happened next?
I didn't come out with a first class honours. I came out with a 2-2. But again, for me, that was
a Desmond, as they say in South
Desmond 2-2. I didn't want to say that, but yeah. But for me, it was about coming out, doing what you can do to the best of your ability. And those university days for me were also about, it sounds a little bit twee, but finding out who you are and enjoying yourself and exploring the world, and making new friends and connections. But I guess what was dripping out of that for me was, well, two things. Is that I've got I wanted to go away and explore the world and travel, and enjoy exploring, because I think I've kind of an adventurous gene within me, and I have that to this day. You know, one of the challenges that I have to this day is to try and visit new places or travel and work abroad once a year, because I think the world is, back then was quite a small place, but now it feels such a smaller place. Sorry, back then it was quite a big place. Now it feels so much smaller. But I went and traveled the world. I went back to South Africa to see what that was like, because I'd never actually kind of existed there as an adult. So I went back to South Africa, traveled, lived there, got offered to work there, and I went back then, and things didn't quite work out as I was promised, but I used the sport vehicle to connect with people. But I met some interesting individuals and had a good experience, and then I did the old traveling and experiencing sport across the world, went to Australia, New Zealand, and actually part of my focus again, and as I'm sharing this, I feel like I wander a little bit in what I do, but actually underpinning that, there's quite a focus and quite a purpose to what I do. And back then I traveled the world, but I ended up in on Vancouver Island, where I worked at school for 6 months, and it was an international boarding school, and I became a housemaster and taught sport, and then I worked at the Commonwealth Games, which were in Vancouver Island.
The word that's in my mind here, just you know, building up the journey, as it were. One is, I think you're resilient, whether you see it or not, and two, because of all the things that have happened and that you've described, you know, I don't know whether you do back yourself, but you could and you should, because you know you have been more than a survivor. You know, you survived education because you had to work hard, and then as you do what you enjoy and what you're good at, and those are skills you can do those anywhere. What was your what was your take on South Africa as a? I mean, you've got an inside lens, sort of, because you know you are what you are, but you hadn't been for years, and then what did you feel? Did you feel, you know, my heart's pulling me here, or did you feel like a tourist, or what?
Well, great question, actually, and it was a real purposeful thing at the end of university to go back there. I got promised to go back there with a job of working in sport, and I went back there because I also had my grandma was still alive then, and I went back and used her as a kind of a base to start off with. How did I feel? Well, I felt really let down by the fact that what was promised me didn't come to fruition, but I needed to make a go of it, and it was something that I wanted to go and really experience. And it was a really hard time to go, because I recognized, you know, the story that I would tell, I would be in my place where I was staying, and it had, you know, 6 security systems. It would have razor wire around it. You know, we would have armed response units because of the environment that we lived in. Yet it was such a brilliant and beautiful country in that sense, but had so much difficulty to it. So I remember sitting there to this day, you know, thinking, God, the kind of the conflict that was going on within me and within the country, actually, I was really experiencing that. So I wanted to go and live it and see it, and I felt it. And the security and the uncertainty of, you know, driving down the road and maybe having something stolen from your car. My grandparents were religious, and they used to go to church on a Sunday morning. But my grandmother's partner, she had more recently married, used to have to stand outside the church with his gun to protect all the cars. And that whole idea of the security and the uncertainty and the unsafety, and that you had to protect your cars outside church, just didn't sit comfortably. And I played football, you know, again, I used football. I played football for Wits University, which was the big university in Johannesburg, you know, and that was my way back into connecting with people. And I didn't know anybody, but I needed to, you know, and this is part of why sport is such a great vehicle to connect people and have a common interest. But what really, again, sits with me to this day is I used to go and play football, and then instead of people handing in their wallets and stuff and collecting them, they're like valuables when we used to go out on the pitch so they didn't get stolen. People used to hand their guns in, and I just thought, oh gosh, that never just sat very comfortably with me, that people that I was playing football with used to put their guns in as valuables, and just that whole idea of the security just didn't sit comfortably with me. But yet it was such a powerful, beautiful place.
You describe it really well. I've been twice, and the word fragile as a country comes to me, and it was, we travelled in bubbles. We travelled in an aeroplane bubble, a car bubble, to the lodge bubbles whenever we went out. Into, I thought, a taxi driver took us to the place where Reva Steenkamp sadly was murdered by Pistorius. All that razor wire and all that, just beautiful, beautiful country, but just on eggshells and so sad.
Well, I've been back since to Cape Town, where you can probably fly in and fly out and use it as a you're more of a tourist. You said where you were a tourist or how, but it felt, you can see the beauty of the country, and it's got so much lovely stuff going for it. But it just feels very fragile. I think it's a nice word.
Well, the conversation is evocative for me. Is triggering some thoughts as well. I never had a gap year. Because I was 5 years at university, but my son also attended Newcastle University and had a gap year. And we get a WhatsApp message when he's arrived in Fiji. Dad, I've just been down onto the beach and had a game of touch rugby with the boys. And I was like, keep playing, I'm coming on the next flight.
That's what it's about.
But it is, and that, have boots will travel, right? And you did that. So anyway, but all good things have to come to an end. You've done your years around the world, and you come back and thinking, is the future Mrs. Levine on the scene at this stage, or are you still?
No. Well, I guess I'm early mid-20s here. Came back and got a job working in again. Either what I knew what I could get a job as, because you have to start your career. And I started on the journey working in a university, and I ironically, going full circle, I started teaching on the kind of the BTEC that I actually was on in the early days.
Are you back in Yorkshire here?
Yeah. So I came back to Yorkshire, came back to where I live as a base, and I've kind of stayed there because I'm very lucky where I live. I think what going away has really taught me and opened my eyes to is how lucky I am in where I was brought up, not born, but where I brought up in the north of England. I'm very lucky here. It's really central, it's beautiful, it's got lots of stuff going for it. So I got a job working in the local college, and I again was lucky enough or opportune enough to fall on my feet in setting up and being part of setting up a football education program. So back in the days where they were trying to bring sport programs and education together and see how they might fit and work, and I set up in a local college here which had really poor facilities, but the first idea of bringing young lads in that were kind of a bit disenfranchised from education, but really loved their sport, and how we could blend the two together and give them a sport experience, but also help them learn along the way.
But it's like early days. What people talk about now is sport for development, isn't it? Using sport. So okay, so again, ahead of your time, Mr. Levine, if I may be so bold.
Well, do you know what? Alongside that, and I feel more comfortable saying that about ahead of my time, but alongside of this, on and off throughout university and through into the early parts of my formal career, though, I had a football coaching business which I set up. So I worked for the local authority, and I think this is really important for many people listening in on their sport journeys, that I put the hard yards in. I worked for the local authority on pounds per hour, running lots of football coaching sessions, through the cold nights and the deepest, darkest winters kind of stuff, and it was tough. And I got to a stage where I thought, well, actually, I could do it bigger and better than the local authority could. So I left the local authority and set up my own coaching business. And it was called STAR. We called it. It was called Sports Teaching and Recreation, and we called it STAR. And it was based on football, but it became quite multi-sports. And we advertised once on the first kind of session that we set up, and we never advertised again since, because what
Who's we?
Sorry, another guy who worked in the local authority with me, actually. So there was two of us, and I just worked with him. So we were like a bit of a double act. But the thing which I come to realize, where I was kind of before my time, is yes, advertised just once, but people just kept coming back. And why did they keep coming back? Because we played games for understanding, we had fun, we let them do what they wanted to do, but with a real purposeful structure around it. And we played, you know, I say it to this day that the kids came because they wanted to play football. So we let them play football, but we taught them through the football. Didn't do what we as practitioners wanted to do. We were quite participant-led. And we started off with kids that were 3-year-old, 2.5, 3, that ran around in nappies, right the way through to 15, 16-year-olds.
And was there anything formal in the education that you were doing, or it was more like social education and, you know, developing the person and teamship? And
well, I think looking back on it, I would say yes, but there was nothing formal in it in terms of when I did it. You know, we had a curriculum and we followed it. People loved what they did and they kept coming back for more. Quite simply, looking back, that I guess my philosophy was from day one, my success measure was, if people enjoy it enough this week and then come back for more next week, they'll learn. And they did. And they got better, you know, because the environment and the structure allowed them to feel safe, to feel secure, to have fun, to enjoy themselves, and to practice technical aspects of the sports that we did.
So the Dave Levine soccer schools, this is what we'd be calling them these days, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a number of outlets? Did you grow it across the Northeast, or was it just a local one?
We had at one stage, we had about 4 outlets. But again, I was in my early days of kind of running these businesses, and we had 4 outlets. And sounds a bit sort of self-centered here, but I think what people began to realize is it was about the quality of the delivery and the environments that we create. And at that stage, I wasn't aware of how to get others to deliver it on that kind of way. When I did give it all up, I kind of passed it on to the 2 young people that ran it with us. And within 6 months, it had fallen away and we'd lost it all. You know, they were buying into the environments that the coaches create. And 2 people that I passed it on to, is kind of my legacy. Didn't quite run it in the same way, didn't kind of put the same energy to it, and it drifted.
And why did you pass it on?
So I passed it on because a family came along then. I had a family. I'd also been doing this for about 15 years, sort of evenings, weekends, school holidays. And my career changed a different path, really, and I needed to get a different balance. And I think one of the things I've also learned along the way in a lot of my training and experience is also this stuff about getting a balance to be able to perform. And so I chose the different direction at that stage, both family-wise, but also for my career.
But also, I guess, families come along, you need stability on the other hand, so that, because you're now a father.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
Well, the coaching business was never going to be enough for me to really live on or retire on. So I always had other things going on in behind. My main career sort of change at that stage was to purposefully move out of a career in sport. And I went and worked in the large corporate world of pharmaceutical sales and utilities and big business where
Whoa. This is the bloke who said, do what you're good at and do what you enjoy. Just square that one off for me.
The purposefulness of that was I needed to go and see what it was like. And I think what I came back to is actually it stretched me, it exposed me to some new learning and development opportunity. I don't know that I would have called it back then, but I was curious to go and work in a world where I might be exposed to a lot of challenge. And I always used to say I'd never go work in sales. Sales was a dirty word for me back then. And and I think I probably ended up in the hardest, toughest sales environment possible, where I was going to speak to doctors and consultants, and you got to speak to them for 10 minutes if you were lucky a year, and it was a dreadfully hard, tough environment, but I learned loads. But the coming back to your point about why moving away from sport, maybe, or doing what you're good at, I fell out of love with the education system because of the bureaucracy that came into it, and I felt I was losing doing what I wanted to do in terms of helping individuals get better at what they do, as opposed to filling in lots of paper and the bureaucracy. And I felt my values didn't align.
So you went from one bureaucratic system.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing here, right? But I'm going to use the phrase, how long did you stick with farmer sales, and what were the conclusions you came to?
I stayed in farmer sales for just short of 2 years, and then I moved on to utility sales, setting up a sales force for a big utilities company, where they brought me in to try and set something up, and then they realized that they didn't know what they were doing, and they were not giving me the tools to enable me to do what I knew was right, or use my skill sets. So I stayed in that world probably for about just over 2.5 years. And the conclusions I came to is that, and I use this phrase really honestly, is that I probably learned the most I've ever learned, probably, but I hated it the most. And
is it learning from your mistakes? Would that be fair, or was it a mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake. The environment wasn't what I wanted, and I had compromised what I enjoy doing, but I learned a lot about sales, a lot about marketing, about how to relate to people and the importance of it or not, because those environments didn't really encourage that or allow that, in my mind. I learned a lot about leadership and management, and in terms of how to engage people and get people to buy in, and it was I use this word carefully, but it also provided a playground for me to learn in and develop in. And alongside of that, I was doing a lot of personal development courses myself. So I did coaching, I did a counselling and a group development qualification, just to kind of also learn a bit about myself. And I think this is a bit of the flavour that I link back to my mother, in terms of the work that she does and how she does it. And I got interested in that. I don't know if it was learning from mistakes, but I could also see how things could go badly wrong.
Are we still playing any sport here, or are you still coaching in any shape or form, or nothing?
A bit of coaching. I ended up coaching football, an open age team in a sort of semi-professional environment for a couple of years, and then I was playing regular local football, Saturday and Sunday football for enjoyment, and cricket.
How are you juggling that with being, so we're on the road knocking on doctors' surgeries doors or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're doing a bit of coaching. How did Mrs. Levine feel about all this?
So Mrs. Levine came along on that sort of stage.
So she knew what she was getting.
Yeah, she did, and the children was just sort of young there, but I think that sort of started to back off. And the story I actually tell, to sort of moving it on, is I left that job with no job to go to. So I came out of the utilities firm and I had no job to go to, because I was so unhappy with what was happening to me and the environment I was in, that I handed my notice in with nothing to go to.
What did you feel was happening to you? Was it challenging your values, or or what?
It was completely compromising me. My values were being compromised, probably was the best word, in terms of what was being, again, probably that congruence, what was being said and what was being done weren't aligned.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I think the company that I was in were wanting us to set up a sales kind of team, and the sales team was to go in and speak to solicitors, actually. So when solicitors do conveyancing searches for buying and selling of properties and houses, they need information from utilities companies, and the utilities company that I had had absolutely excellent information. So our job was to sell it into solicitors, which was quite a viable option actually at the moment, because it was better than local authority information. But actually the environment and the context was quite bullying. It was quite aggressive. They were setting targets which were unrealistic. We were asking for resources. There was a colleague of mine who was alongside me to do this. We were asking for information resources which wasn't being provided because they didn't understand the process. the detail and the information that was needed. So it was a mismatch, really. And I think me being true to myself is, you know, and I learned this also in the pharmaceutical industry, is it talked about a concept of the golden handcuffs, where people were getting paid well and having all the nice trappings and all the nice freebies and whatever came along with it, with the job, but were really deeply unhappy in what they were doing. And for me, what was really more important is, are you better off getting paid reasonably well and doing all right, but being deeply unhappy, or being really happy and maybe earning a little less money, but actually being able to flourish in what you do?
And a difficult decision to come to on your own as an individual, but when you've got a young family, I mean, that probably took a bit of balls and a bit of good communication with Mrs. Levine.
I do recall her saying, I won't swear, but she does recall, you know, don't ever do that again to me, you know. But I think there's something about the drive of your values or what we believe in and your purpose, you know. And I think without knowing the words maybe around that so much, but you know, I think I learned there that if you're signing up to something, you're more likely to go and deliver on it. And if you're not signed up to it and you don't believe in it, you're less likely to give it your energy. And you know, maybe playing back to that resilience, I've got an entrepreneurial spirit in me, you know, and a freedom in me. And I think corporate nature there felt constraining, but I also have in the back of me that entrepreneurial spirit of, you know, and I use this a lot in the work that I do, and I have to practice what I preach, is that I ask myself the question, you know, how would I feel if I never gave it a go working for myself or working in the sport industry or whatever? And I often ask that, and I would never want to have any regrets of not having done.
No. So how long were you, you know, you left with nothing to go to? How long were you left with nothing to go to? And what was the next part?
So I left there, nothing to go to. I was unemployed probably for about 6 to 8 months on the dole, which is not a lovely experience, but an important one. And I in that reflective time, probably hit quite a low time, but called back onto my principles and values around. Well, in that time, I actually, me and my wife ended up having to live back at my parents' house for a short period of time, which was not very pleasant, but you know, needs must. And I call back on that idea, you know, who are you, Dave? What are you about? What really floats your boat? You know, what are you going to give your heart and soul to? And what kept coming back to me was sport. Really excited me. I loved the idea of working in sport, because that's what I've done bits of and enjoyed. And I think more deeper, actually, what came out was I needed to work with people. I got a job back in sport, developing coaching qualifications, because that was the first job that had sound sport in the title. But I was sat behind a computer writing coaching qualifications, which was brilliant because it got me into the industry. But I realised after 18 months, 2 years, that I wasn't working with people enough. I was working with computers and systems, and got frustrated. Well, not frustrated. I needed to move through that and move towards, you know, what would make my career and my job and my day-to-day life more nourishing and fulfilling.
Was this Sports Coach UK or?
Yeah, so I worked. My qualification job was with first for sport qualifications, writing qualifications, which was then the sister company of Sports Coach UK, and then over time I managed to find a way to move from one of the sister companies to the other.
Right. Okay. So as you moved away from the laptop or the computer, it'd be the desktop, wouldn't it? What was the work you were doing that made you feel better because you were working with more people?
You know, to this day, I tell an interesting story, because when I was in the pharmaceutical world, I used to have to drive around the outskirts of Leeds, and I used to drive up and down a road called Cardigan Road in Leeds, and I used to see a sign on the wall, and I thought, I wonder what that job is, and I wonder what that organisation is, and I never knew what the relevance of that was. But then 5 years later, I managed to get a job working for that organisation that I always wondered what it was. And that's happened to me 2 or 3 times in my career in terms of seeing something out there and wondering, and therefore, I guess subconsciously, unconsciously, there's something about drawing me towards it or finding a way to make that happen. And I used to be driving past the organisation, which was Sports Coach UK. And so that the sister company was the qualifications company, and I ended up getting a job there working with governing bodies, helping them with their systems, their procedures, their people, their training, and really engaging with the organisations to help them improve what they do, which for me was
that outward facing? You were going into the NGBs and that's how you got your peoply bit?
Yeah, so I was working with lead officers in governing bodies. I worked with big organisations like I say not organisations because I worked with sports at that stage. So I was working with football and cricket, rugby union, tennis, equestrian, all those big sports, because I was working with those sports across the 4 home countries as well. So with the governing bodies within the home countries, which really gave me a feel of going out and using my kind of coaching skills that I'd learned, but also my, I know to this day I've got quite a consultative style and a facilitative style, and I think that really played to my strengths working in that environment.
So I'm hearing, there's a set of weighing scales here, right?
Yeah.
And I've got entrepreneurial flair.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got, but the opposite to that is working in an organisation.
Yeah. And
the other one is working in sport. And we've had the farmer and the utilities, and and here we are back in sport. There is something in this, and it's a 3-dimensional set of weighing scales almost, because there's the family in this as well, and Dave Levine, isn't there? So here we're in sport, so that's a positive.
Yeah.
But we're working in a larger organisation, Sports Coach UK, which we now know as UK Coaching, obviously. But that came to an end. What was that about?
About 12 or so years ago now. My I guess sport was going through lots of changes. There was lots of funding cuts, not just across sport, but across many organisations, and sport was under a lot of pressure. At Sports Coach UK, we had around that, probably 2 or 3 years before I left, we had a new chief executive, which was having to navigate a lot of the coaching sport landscapes and the funding cuts and so on. My job changed. I managed to, under the chief exec at the time was Pat Duffy, and he brought in a kind of a philosophy about really trying to grow the people within the organisation, and how do we bring in a coaching culture. And that really played to my interest, the idea of a coaching culture, and how we could take the principles of what was of sport and coaching, and how we were working with external bodies, and how we could really play to it internally and bringing those sporting principles into a business. And I just thought, wow, this just sounds brilliant. And I applied for a new role which was set up, which was the learning and development manager. So it still felt very similar to, in the sense of working in sport, working in a coaching organisation, but it became an internal kind of position more so, in terms of working with our staff, the internal staff. And unfortunately, as funding cuts come, and I survived, or I lived through, I think it was two restructures as a learning and development manager. But my time came as soon as I got the job. I think I was in the job for about 18 months, and it was a very difficult job to try and navigate, because the organisation never had such a role, and to really invest in it. And I got made redundant about 12 years ago. Saying that, I'm a positive kind of person, and I look back on it quite favourably, in a sense of that actually I was ready to kind of fly again, and I needed to kind of fulfil and touch on my entrepreneurial spirit that was buzzing around, I think, inside of me. And I'd always had that question again, Dave, how would you feel, or would you regret it if you never had worked for yourself? So at that time, the timing was right there to, yes, I got made redundant.
Whoa. So Mrs. Levine had said to you previously, and is on the record, saying, don't do that to me again. Now, this isn't your fault that you've been made redundant. And it's not you that's been, it's not you that's redundant, it's the job. And you always, right? So and I've got these weighing scales rattling like mad here.
Yeah.
So go on.
Well, it wasn't me that was leaving the job. The job was getting rid of me. So, and you pick up a key point there, I guess. The situation was quite drastic because the day that my redundancy letter dropped on the mat was the day that we had our third child as well. So I had 3 children and a redundancy letter and kind of, in essence, no job to go to or to do. So it was quite a tricky time in the family.
Did you know the redundancy was coming, or was the letter the first you knew of it?
I'd gone through a kind of the 6 months or so process. So yeah, but I think even to this day I was prepared for it. So I was working ideas up, but setting up your own business or trying to find another job is tricky.
You were under a bit of pressure there. We're back to some resilience again, aren't we?
Massive amounts of pressure, and the point that's really key for me though is however prepared I was for the redundancy, and I was prepared enough, it still really shook me the day the letter dropped in the mat and I read it and I thought, wow, I really
it's for real then.
It's for real. Yeah. It really struck me. But that was the time where I said, do you find another job and go with what's safe-ish, or do you give it a go and set up, continue to try and build what you've got and really grow that? And I threw my energy and my eggs in the basket and thought, right, come on, and let's try and give it a go. And it was a pretty hair-raising time because we've got 3 kids. The car that we had wasn't big enough, so that the small redundancy payout that I had went on having to buy a second-hand car to fit us all in. So I had no backstop, as it were, in terms of finances. It was a case of right, off you go. And my world had shrunk because I'd also become quite an internal-facing practitioner, and to this day I recall actually one of my biggest learnings is the importance of your network and how I work with that and the relationships around that, and mine had really shrunk. So it took me a heck of a long time to go back out there and build that. And also, relationships are really key to the way I work, and I think relationships take time to build, and I was in a really difficult place there because I didn't have the time actually, but I needed it.
So were you doing this on your own? Did you have some go-to people that you could say, look, I'm in the doo-doos here, and I'm was there any? Did you have any sounding boards, or did you just do it on your own steam?
I have lots of sounding boards, informal sounding boards. Probably it felt quite lonely to start with, I guess, because I had a big weight on my shoulders.
And responsibility.
A huge responsibility, yeah. And I've never really recognised that. But, and I don't like using the word but, it did also give me a really enormous learning experience of feeling the pressure. And I think it was important for me to feel the pressure and feel what it was like to be under that responsibility and pressure, because I think that also really feeds the learning, but also feeds the resistance and feeds my purpose. That makes sense.
No.
So I did actually really work through that and understand my resilience thresholds. And actually, when the bank account hasn't got much money in or work's not coming in, how do I manage that? And to this day, Ian, if I'm honest, I don't think you're ever there. I think I still think about it, work it through, and call on that.
So that's interesting, right? So we're now talking about founding. This is the early days of the Summit Partnership, right?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at 2 of those words then. Summit means that you get to the top, and yet you've just said, I don't think you ever really get there, Ian. So let's have the question in 2 parts. Let's have a bit about why Summit then, and unpack why the word partnership's also important in there.
Yeah. I thought long and hard about this actually, and I'm an ideas person actually. I'm quite good at that. And when you work for yourself, you've got to come up with the ideas, but you've also got to bring them to fruition and make them come to life. So that's one of the journeys. So I spent lots of time thinking about what I could do and how I could do it, and I think that's, for me, that's the exciting, easy bit. But I did spend a lot of time thinking about the name, and I didn't just pick the name. Somebody else had it, or it just rolled off. But it needed to mean something to me. What's fallen out of all of the work that I do, and I think is then kind of even coming back to that little shield maybe that underpins what I do and how I do it, is, Summit's got two meanings here, hasn't it? It's about also reaching the top of whatever, and I define it reaching your top, whatever that may be. Okay.
So there's your. Doesn't matter what the football result was.
Indeed. So it's about yours. It's not about mine or anything. It's about actually aspiring, being ambitious, being optimistic about what you can achieve, fulfilling your potential kind of summit for you. Summit's also about bringing people together.
Oh, as in a summit. Yeah.
As in a summit, you could also bring people together, which is also kind of plays true to my philosophy and values, because I like to bring people together. I think that's what takes on the journey. And then partnership is, look, my wife is a partner in the partnership, as it were, but actually my approach to the work I do through the Summit Partnership, and I hope the people that I work with would, pay testament to this, is that I don't do two people, I work with them. So I work in partnership with them. And that's really important to me, that I won't come along and tell you what to do and how to do it. I'll come and sit alongside you and let's do it together. And therefore, partnership really paints a real solid picture, and hopefully comes across in the way that I portray it and the way that I work, is that I do things with and alongside.
Well, I think I can vouch for that. But the Summit Partnership clearly isn't enough, because you've decided in the last couple of years to set up Sports Stories. What was it that triggered that, and and what's your reflection on how that's going now?
I've worked really hard to develop the Summit Partnership, and keep it going, and keep the right balance in terms of my life and what drives me and where all my energies are. And what's really important for me is that I wouldn't want the Summit Partnership and my work to be really, really, really successful at the detriment of other aspects of my life. I'd like it to be successful in the balance with the other aspects of my life. And I think that's really important for me. And I've worked, some people would say, if you set up on your own, if you can get past the 3 years or so mark, you've done really well, because that's when you've actually cracked it, or you've got a bit of a pattern. So I feel really nourished, fulfilled, pleased with the fact that I've managed to navigate the Summit Partnership this far and keep it going in its own right. But what I also have recognised is, and this is probably giving more of me away, is that I've never really developed the Summit Partnership in terms of its brand and its awareness. And I don't sell me, I sell other people. And I think it's time to also shout about me a little bit more, in terms of what I do. So I've helped other people grow their brands. And that's what I mean, is I've worked for other people as well. And so what came along here is to give it a go of developing my own brand rather than other people's. And that's where I've got the Summit Partnership, which I can build. But what's really piqued my interest, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years, if I go back that far, is I feel very lucky in what I do. And yes, I've worked hard to get to it, but I'm lucky in a sense that I get to speak to so many different people and get an insight into their worlds. And there's loads of great research and evidence to say, as a coach and as a developer of others, you reap a lot of the benefits yourself. You're not just helping others, you're learning yourself. And in hearing other people's stories, I'm thinking, wow, I'm so privileged and lucky. I'm learning and developing as well as giving to others. I thought, well, I wonder if we could spread that somewhat, and actually how people can share their stories can be so beneficial to so many more. And then I was on a program doing some of my own personal development, which I'm really keen to make sure I practice again what I preach, to be able to fulfill my needs but help others. And somebody once said to me, and they hit the nail on the head. They said, Dave, you're playing in the little league at the minute. You really want to be playing in the big league. And I said, and we played with the idea. And the big league is, I'm really passionate about what I do, and I'm really convinced, and I could sell that, I know, and that actually this can really make a difference to people's worlds, the idea of sport, but actually the stories and the principles. Because so many people like the idea of sport, but there's so much learning that can get from within it, from hearing others. Not to copy, but to make them think and to learn. So Sports Stories sort of fell out of that idea, is that actually could I start capturing more stories and more development opportunities for more people on a bigger scale? Because then I'm not just playing in the little league, I'm actually impacting and influencing and supporting and developing so many more people. And my question to myself was, Dave, if I didn't give it a go and grow it, would I have a regret? And I would. And that's why I'm on the journey. And I want to have a greater impact that I'm already having. But, you know, I've enjoyed it. It's hard work. I do see the fruits of the labour that I'm putting in. I want to continue on that way.
Dave Levine, entrepreneur, got to give it a bash, haven't you? That's how it is. So you are the common denominator in all of the sports stories. Give us a couple of things that have informed and influenced you that you've learned from the sports stories that you've heard, i.e., name names if you wish, but you think, oh, I've never thought about that, or you know what, I'm going to do that myself, or what were the things that made you sort of sit up and go, wow, boom, light bulb?
I've worked in this field a long time in terms of development, and I don't know that I've had loads of standout light bulbs from all of the conversations, if I'm honest. But I've had so many little gems and little nuggets, and what I love about it is actually sometimes the affirmation that it brings and the confirmation that actually what I'm doing or what I see in other people's worlds is true, is good, is comforting. In terms of my process, what the stories have brought is they've challenged me. I've had to learn something new, so I've gone out there, and so that's the learning in it for me. A lot of the time is to actually doing the conversations, practicing the listening, asking the hopefully the right questions, getting out of my own way in terms of being my own self-critic. It's been part of the journey, which has been some of my biggest learning. And I still to this day have a wobble around that. And I think that's healthy, you know, and understanding that it matters if you've got that, you know, and so my self-talk, the conversations have provided that. Then also, you know, coming to the actual conversations themselves, I've spoken to a number of people who I know and I've worked with, you know, so I kind of know their stories. And what the learning I've taken out of those conversations is you never truly know somebody, because
I was just going to say that these are stories I know, but
yeah,
you probably didn't.
Well, or I hear bits that I know, but then it challenges me in terms of the questions and actually the engagement. You go a bit deeper, or you go a little bit.
You hear the stuff on the surface, don't you?
Yeah. And that's a great learning for me around actually how often do we really get to know somebody, or what is the value of really getting to know somebody, both for the listener but also for the teller of their stories, because a number of people, and you know, I'm probably testament to that today, is this is quite a cathartic experience sharing my story. It's cathartic, it's helpful, it's made me reflect. I've probably said things which I didn't think I would, but also things that I planned I've not said. So trusting that approach has been really, really valuable. And that's what I've got from some of the people that I've listened to. And then also, you know, the more profile guests that I've had on, you know, seeing them for who they are, their authenticity, and actually recognizing that we all have to work quite hard. We've all had not that linear journey. You know, it's all gone through our own various ups and downs. And actually some of the principles, some of the strategies people have learned and used really resonate with me, but others don't. And that's all right. You know, and I think that's what's been so brilliant about this. That there's been something in every conversation, but there's been some bits which don't resonate with me, but without me engaging in it, I don't know that.
So we're going to wrap this up with two quotes, Dave Levine. One quote, what's the quote that somebody else has said that, you know, is one of your go-tos? And the other quote, using your phrase self-talk, is what would the Dave Levine of today say to the Dave Levine who probably left Northumbria University?
I'm going to break the rules a little bit here, because there's a couple of people there's loads of quotes out there, and I really like quotes because they get you thinking. I have a couple of quotes which I go to often, but I look at them all day. I look at quotes all day, every day. Quote that really resonates with me, and I share it. And it's a well-trodden one. It's one by Theodore Roosevelt, and it's, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think it's just that simple, that. But for me, that's the foundation of the work that I do. I think this is also about the sports story stuff. It's about caring about others, because then they'll listen to what you've got to say. And it's a two-way kind of relationship. So that's really powerful for me. I also like a lot of the Nelson Mandela ones for obvious reasons, because of my kind of connection with South Africa and stuff like that, and the difference that he's made. I'm not going to name any quotes in particular, but I just think some of the gems and what he stands for, and the resilience and how he treats people, but he's actually really quite purposeful and driven, is fabulous. And then the last quote I'm going to share, and it just always sticks with me, is by Maya Angelou, and it was, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think going back over my story and over the many years as a coach, but also being coached or being mentored or being taught in schools, I remember the people that made me feel like I could do it, that believed in me, that had optimism, that cared for me, and all of those things. So I think that's the foundation to both what I'm trying to create, but actually all the work that I do, because that's what's really helped me along the way.
I don't know why, but I do know why, but I've just listening to you there in summary. I mean, I feel quite emotional about that, because it's a very authentic Dave Levine that's talking to me, and to sort of paraphrase Roosevelt in conclusion, I know you know a lot, but perhaps more importantly, I know how much you care about the people you work with and our sector. And I can't think of a better way to end this other than to say, Dave Levine, thank you very much. It has been a genuine privilege and a pleasure. Good man. Take the rest of the day off.
It's important for me to thank you as well, Ian, I think, because look, I feel quite emotional, and I'm this is what I want from this. I do really care. And I think what we've got here is something that I really want to try and grow and flourish to really help many people. So, thank you for stepping out and offering to do this for me. It's been in the back of my mind, but it's important that I share my journey, and I want to, because I know I've come to realize I've got lots to offer, as everybody has, actually, and that's the avenue that we're trying to create. You being a guest earlier on in the series has been really important, as is every guest. They've all had something to offer. I want to bring more of me to this, and I will do as I go forward here. I've got aspirations to bring different insights, but I want it to be uncomfortably comfortable as well, so it challenges people to really think, because I think we've got so much to offer. So, on that note, just want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule as well. And let's maybe do this again. We've labelled one or two other podcasts which we could do and dig a little bit deeper. But on today, thanks for asking some really great questions and helping me share my sports story and broad.
Well, there you have it. Sports story of Dave Levine, my very good self. Now, it does feel a little bit strange wrapping up a podcast about yourself and reflecting on it. But there are a couple of things which I wanted to just highlight and bring to light. I covered a little bit around my philosophy, my values, and some of the key attributes and strengths. And I would just like to share a really warm thanks and a very big appreciation to Mr. Ian Braid for steering me through the conversation and asking some great questions just to help me think and articulate my story. So thanks a lot, Ian. I really appreciate that. Now, in terms of my philosophy, values, and key attributes, they really dripped out, I thought, quite strongly in terms of actually my values being fairness, authenticity, hard work, and congruence. My philosophy being very much around, playing to your strengths and enjoying what you do. And then some of the key attributes and strengths of mine being resilient and finding a way, and also good enough. And actually how that's really played out throughout my life and actually been informed by my early childhood experiences.
And I want to kind of leave a couple of questions with you, the listener, to really help you think about your journey and your story. Now, what has happened in your life that's actually influenced it? And how has it influenced what you do right now? And by understanding that, how might it influence you and inform you and help you going forward? So really reflect on your journey. And the second part to my question would be about the value of sharing your story and articulating and talking out aloud. I found today's podcast experience really cathartic and really insightful. And by talking it through, sharing it, but also sharing it in a sort of an avenue or in a place like this, is actually really challenged me to think deeply. And I've actually shared things which I thought I might not, but also there's things which I've still held back, which I would still like to share further. But I just think the exercise, the principle and the process of doing something like this is really very developmental and beneficial. So consider, how might you share it to a wider audience or just to a small audience, but for your benefit as well. And on that note, there'll be further Sports Stories podcasts, and obviously we delve into the wider individuals' lives coming forward over the coming months. There is also going to be the Sports Stories 15, the SS15s, which, as I mentioned, will be run by Ruby and Lucas. They'll be really exciting, insightful, to the point, topical and relevant themes related to sport. So please look out for those. And if you would like any further details around Sports Stories, please have a look on our website, which is www.sportstories247.com. And as I always say, it's great to hear from you, the listeners, as to what really resonates with you. What do you like? What would you like to hear more of? And what would be really insightful and helpful to you? So please keep in contact, look at the websites, as I mentioned, but also we're on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. So please engage, drop us a note, as we're really here to both offer entertainment, but even more purposefully, we're looking to help you transform, change, move on through your life. And there's loads of good content and resources we would like to make accessible to you to help you on your journey. So all it really leaves me to say is have a great week. Look out for the SS15s coming down the line. There'll be further full-length podcasts coming shortly, but keep in touch. Have a great time. Keep smiling, and I really look forward to you joining me for further great content through Sports Stories in the weeks and the months ahead. Till then, take care, and I'll see you all again soon.